Yeah.
All right, everybody. Good evening. We're meeting with Bridgette Mayer, who has a gallery in Philadelphia, and I have been following her program, though we have never met. And I like what she does and what she brings to the art world. You know, a lot of what we've been talking about, well, no, let me go backwards. Let's go, we'll get there in a moment. Let's go way back to the beginning. Where were you born? Where were you raised? How did you get from there to what you're doing these days? You've got 5 minutes on that one. Go ahead. Have a good time.
Really good. So I was originally born in Jersey City, New Jersey. I have an interesting story. I was in and out of foster care when I was young. And then eventually ended up in a foster home. My parents adopted me, and I was raised in Huntington County, New Jersey, which is farm country. It's kind of out in the middle of nowhere. So I grew up there, and I ended up going to college at Bucknell University, which is not known as an art school. It's more of an engineering business school. And I decided to major in art history and studio art. My parents made me get a job, so I landed in the art gallery at Bucknell my freshman year and spent 4 years working there, which gave me an interesting snapshot of the gallery world, but from a university perspective. And then I ended up every summer interning in New York. I worked at the Artist Space. I worked at the National Academy Design Museum. I worked with a photographer as a studio assistant, and I was really just trying to figure out my place in the art world. And by the time I graduated, I knew I wanted to be in the for-profit gallery world. I kind of took a look around. I was painting at the time, and it seemed like most of the people in the arts were working in galleries, and I liked that type of work. So I ended up in New York City with David Beitzel Gallery and spent about a year working at David Beitzel Gallery. I think one of the artists you interviewed was Dawood Bey.
Yep.
And also maybe Radcliffe Bailey. I don't know if you've interviewed him.
I know him, but we had no.
Yeah. So those were two of the early artists that I got to work with right out of college. And working with artists from New York and from around the United States that were coming up in the art world really gave me a strong impression of wanting to be in the gallery side and recognizing that I kind of knew that I just didn't have the talent to become a known artist. So I decided at that point that I wanted to stay in the gallery world. So I really worked, I worked for a bunch of people and then started doing my own private consulting, which I did for about a year in Philadelphia, and then started my own gallery when I was 27.
Which was how long ago? 3 years ago?
13 years ago. I just
Awesome.
turned 40. So, and I just celebrated my 13th year anniversary. So thank you for that. Yeah, it's been quite an interesting 13 years.
How is your gallery different now than when you beat the first month?
Oh, wow. Well, very different. I found this dusty old space on Washington Square that had been sitting unused for about 5 years. And I moved in 2001, and flash forward 13 years later, I closed the gallery about 3 years ago and renovated and turned it into a beautiful state-of-the-art 3,000 square foot space and hired an architect and a lighting designer. So the space itself is dramatically different. I'm dramatically different as an art dealer, and the artist program is quite different.
Tell me about the difference in the program.
I started out, at 27, trying to find my place in the Philadelphia market, not seeing any galleries that were showing young artists coming out of graduate school. And Philadelphia is a hotbed of grad school programs and art schools in general. And I wanted to work with my peers. And so I literally started working with artists coming right out of graduate school, and I wanted to give them solo shows and represent them and take on career management and really help them build their resumes and portfolios and build try to get their work outside of Philadelphia, and really I wanted to help them sell their work and make a living as an artist and stay in the arts. So those are my intentions. And as you know, I grew from having one client to now over 400 clients. My options with the type of art and artists that I can show have expanded, and you know, the Philadelphia marketplace has embraced me. I would say every year I've been in business, my business has grown tremendously, and I've had a lot of things happen around artists that I've curated into showing in Philadelphia, and I feel that the marketplace has recognized that I know what I'm doing, I'm not going anywhere, and that a lot of the artists are of great quality, and that I have a viable program. It only took 10 years, though.
That's quicker than many.
Yeah.
There's a subtext in what I'm hearing, and how important is a graduate degree for the artists, visual artists? How important is it for artists, to you, for, you know, with the artists you work with?
I think everyone has a personal opinion, and there's so many great artists that never went to grad school, so I'm not saying that you need to go to grad school to become a great artist, but I've found that I've worked with a few artists over the years that didn't go through graduate school, and I've found that just the level of conversation I could have with them, the type of dialogue I could have was different, and they weren't used to having the work critiqued, and their ideas expanded as much as people that went through that whole practice within a graduate school program. So for me, I mean, although it's not, I mean, as a matter of fact, I'm representing an artist, Federico Herrero, who's showing at the Guggenheim Museum right now, and in January showing at the Saatchi Museum in London, and these museums just bought 5 paintings, and he started out at Pratt and decided a year in that he pulled the plug and it wasn't for him. He went back to Costa Rica and continued to make his paintings, and so it doesn't mean that you have to that's going to make you successful. Everyone's different. But for me, I've early on embraced working with artists with that degree. It just felt like it validated their intention more, and gave them a different intensity at the time.
I need to say for the folks in the audience, when I had a gallery, it was not important to me. And, you know,
Yeah.
Sometimes it would be relevant for when we'd have a discussion, so I could say, oh, you took a class from so-and-so, you know,
Yeah.
just for being able to propel or continue the conversation. But I didn't find it particularly significant.
Yeah.
I think the jury is way out on whether or not this is something you should or should not do. You know, I mean, I respect Bridgette's opinion. I don't know that there is a majority opinion per se.
Yeah.
Who do you consider your audience? Is it Philadelphia? Is it broader than Philadelphia? Who?
I would say it started out as only Philadelphia. I only advertised locally. Most of my business and clients were developed through foot traffic and people coming through and seeing local reviews. And then when I started doing art fairs in 2007, I found that my audience expanded as people from around the US were going to these fairs and seeing artists there. So I feel like that expanded it. And then doing more national advertising in some of the art magazines has helped that. And having artists show in museums and doing different things outside of the East Coast and Philadelphia has helped.
What percentage of your sales are in Philadelphia, basically, and outside, you know, Eastern Pennsylvania?
I would say at this point, I would say about 50% are from Philadelphia and the rest are from around the US.
And what percentage of your sales are as a result of art fair contacts and not?
I would say at least 30% of that is from art fairs.
How many art fairs do you do a year?
At one point we were doing 3 a year, one in New York, one in Dallas, and one in Miami. I've reduced that to Dallas and Miami, so we're down to 2. They're expensive.
All right. Yeah, I think it's fair for artists to comprehend the expense. What kind of money are we talking about?
Depending on the size booth that the booth can run me anywhere from $30,000 to $50,000, and then shipping is anywhere, depending on what I'm shipping, the size of the work, from $10,000 to $15,000. And then we have staff costs with hotels and advertising costs. So I spend between, I would say, $60,000 and $75,000 on a fair very easily.
And how many days, how many months does this fair last?
It's 4 days.
4 days. So we're talking.
Yeah.
So all right, but pay attention to this, you guys. So we're talking 70. Let's call it $80,000 over 4 days. So and if you have probably a 50-50 split, but maybe we're giving some discounts, but let's not worry about that. So it's a 50. So on each day you need to sell $40,000 worth of art to break even on a given day. For a 4-day show, you need to sell over $160,000 to break even financially.
Yeah.
How do you feel about artists who come up to you doing an art fair and want to talk to you about how cool they are?
That's tough, because I try to educate artists about getting out there and promoting themselves. And at the same time, when I'm working at a fair and we're looking to talk to clients and collectors and art advisors, I usually ask for a card, and I always follow up and look at a website. I mean,
I'm sure you're cordial, but you have priorities, and
I do. I feel for artists. I was a painter at one point in my life, and I understand the challenges. And I do think, even though I still think artists should go out to fairs and meet people and see how people, see how they're curating booths, see what's showing. There's so many trends that happen that you learn about, and to see where their work fits in the context of the art world, what galleries are showing what they might be doing. And it's a great way to connect and to understand and to learn.
It's also really tiring on the gallery, and
it's exhausting. And I'll be honest, I hate doing them. Like I really don't like doing art fairs, and I feel like it's there's some galleries that do one every other month. They might do 6 to 10 fairs a year, which to me is insane.
I'm sure there are galleries that just ship art from one fair to another, and it never even goes home again.
Yeah, exactly.
Then they have to, and that's a whole other, mess, etc.
Yeah.
What about, let's talk specifically about you and Philadelphia and proximity to New York. I mean, it seems to me, here in Chicago, I think galleries frequently have a problem because people want to go shop, for lack of a better word, in New York. It seems like everywhere except New York, there's a big, there's a market that yields to New York somewhere nearby, or London or Los Angeles. What do you do? How do you address that? Did we lose you? Was there just thunder there? Seems like the answer is yes. Let's hold tight a second. And I know, let's see, I can't stop the recording. I don't want to do that. I think it's an interesting situation for Philadelphia, and I do wonder what people do there. And I think that Philadelphia, to an extent, has, a greater sense of history and tradition. I want to hear Bridgette's answer. Hello, Bridgette. We lost you, didn't we? We need to have weatherproof internet. I think Bridgette logged out, and I hope she comes back. We'll have to see what happens. Why don't we stall for a moment, and I will take questions from people who want to ask them. Somebody want to just say in the chat box that you have a question, and I'll call on you? Olga, let me unmute you, and I will take your question. Go ahead, Olga.
Yeah, I'm curious about these art fairs. I was actually thinking in applying for contemporary art fair in New York City, maybe next year or in 2 years, something like that. And it was just my crazy idea, but I would like to hear more about it, if it's worth it.
All right, cool. Let me see. I hear you.
Okay, I'm back on. Sorry about that.
No worries, Bridget. Let me. Olga was asking. We were stalling while you were absent.
Okay, good.
And let me answer Olga's question for a second, and then I'll go back to you. Olga was asking about, I think, participating in an art fair as an artist, and there are only a couple of those. And most art fairs are all about art galleries and dealers. And to most people, and Sam had a different opinion about this with Art Florence, but my sense is that most art fairs that cater to artists are not doing a very good job or not getting enough attention, and it's something that could be developed further. Bridget, what you want to address that, and then we'll come back to the question before we got interrupted?
I would agree with that. It's interesting. I watched the art fair scene before I jumped into it, and it seemed like everyone was going because everyone was doing it. There was almost like this feeding frenzy with going to a fair. That was trendy. And then I think people got burned out on it. And I think the new wave of art fairs is people coming through with an art advisor and collectors coming out, and it being like a very big social event for collectors to get together.
And I think you're having, go ahead. Yeah.
I am and to artist run fairs are, I think they might not get the same attention. And I think people want to see a program and they want to come into a booth that has 10 artists and see what they like. And some of them even learn what they like.
One of the things about regular art fairs is that somebody's passing judgment on the quality of the galleries. And I think passing judgment on the quality of individual artists who are applying to an art fair is really difficult to do, so that frequently it doesn't happen. Olga, I think if you're going to think about an artist-run art fair or an art fair where it's artists who are exhibiting, that you need to ask questions of people who've done it before. And that probably coming from Europe to do this anywhere other than in your own country is probably a lot of expense and a lot of risk, so that it's worth doing a fair amount of research. Bridget, are you there? You look like you froze. I think she might have. This is unfortunate. All right. I'm going to take another question I mean, a couple of you have asked about, gone back to the question about, and I think it's the same about, relationships with an art critic or, Bridget's moving around, we'll be back, about the relationships.
No, I'm sorry about that.
It's okay. I'm taking another question and answering it. Somebody was talking about relationships with art dealers, art critics, other artists. I think it's all the same. And I gave, commented to Brandon in an email today that I think it's like talking to your next door neighbor. I think it's the assumption that this is a person who is prone to liking you, but that you don't have enough information about one another yet. So that I think I think people are people, and you communicate with people as if they were people. I don't think you want to kiss ass too much, and I don't think you want to be rude to anybody. I think you deal with, and you try to let them do most of the talking.
Yeah.
Okay, so Bridget, the question we were trying to get to was, what do you do differently because of Philadelphia's proximity to New York?
I ignore New York.
Okay.
I was in denial of that for many years. And I think when I started out, a lot of my clients were emerging art collectors that weren't really thinking about New York City. They were mainly thinking about buying their first piece of art. And as I've progressed with price points and artist levels, I've come to see that a lot of people, they do want to go to New York and buy. And with some of my more established artists, I'm trying to find artists that aren't showing in New York, that are either showing overseas and other places where people might not have easy access to see the work. And I honestly just try to spend more time and create more value for the collector. And I do that with my artists so that if they're in a position of having to push someone to me or push someone to someone in New York, hopefully I will have built up enough value with the artist where they're going to want to support my gallery. So it's
I mean, I think, yeah, I think what really distinguishes you is the service and the personality and the amount of time that you can give to a collector or to an artist. And, you know, I mean, even though your rent is significant, it is lower than it is for those galleries in New York, and you can afford to indulge your passion more than the cash register.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And, you know, having worked and lived in New York, I really wasn't up for that level of being around that many dealers and the level of finances needed. And I mean, I could handle it now. Back then I didn't want to do that. And I also wanted to be in a smaller marketplace where I could make more of an impact on the art community. And I've been able to do that in Philadelphia, and starting out by working with mainly Philadelphia artists and giving them a great place to show and recognition. So I love being in Philadelphia.
So let's go over some sort of kind of mundane things. How many artists do you represent?
I have 17 artists that I represent full-time, and then a number of artists where I'll curate them into different shows and work with them curatorially.
So 17 tends to be fewer than what I think the norm is. I think the norm is maybe 25. Would you agree?
Yeah, and that's intentional. Sometimes I feel like dealers put too many artists in their stable, and it just guarantees that if someone walks in the door, they're going to be able to sell something on a given day. And my whole focus has continued to be to create partnerships with artists and help build their careers with them and give them more attention and help them make more money. And if I have less artists, I'm able to do that.
I think that defines what the definition of a gallerist, you know, someone who is more interested in the career than the singular transaction.
Yeah. Yeah.
And where are you aware of how many of your artists are men and how many are women?
It's half and half.
By intent, or just because that's how you are?
Yeah, that was intentional. You know, the art world
to find enough men, or what?
It's a very male-dominated place, and I wanted to make sure that women artists had a voice in my program, and I'm always looking at female artists.
I think that's important. And where do your artists come from? Where do they live?
Most of them still live in Philadelphia. A few live in New York City. Some live in California. I have 2 artists that live internationally, one in Miami.
How do you find these artists that don't live down the block? How do they find you? How do these relationships begin?
I spent some time going abroad and meeting with gallerists and curators to find out artists who were kind of not in the marketplace. And that's how I was able to find several artists from overseas that hadn't shown in the US before. And then a lot of when I started my program, it was word of mouth and people saying, oh, you like this type of artist, you should look at this person. And seeing stuff in print, reading reviews, seeing stuff in other places. I found an artist, I was traveling into Canada, saw a magazine article, loved the work, followed up, and signed them on. So just seeing stuff everywhere.
Are people sending you emails and saying, look at me, or growing relationships with you, and then sometimes you see a way? Yeah. Yeah.
I'm going to tell a group of 50 people.
Yeah, and this goes out to more with the recording.
Send me websites, and I can't help myself. I'm curious, and I love looking at art, and I love seeing what people do, and I look at every website that's sent to me, and I usually write back, and if it's work that I'm interested in, I do a lot of art consulting, and that is more than just my program. I work with artists that aren't on my website through art consulting, and so I keep a database of names and websites and artists that I like. I may not be showing them, but if I have a project to curate them in, then I'll put them in a project.
Do you think the gallery has a specific aesthetic?
It's I love abstract painting, and I love process-driven work, and I tend to focus on beauty, technology, and science. Those are common threads that I'm interested in. I've added photography the last 3 years. I have 3 photographers that I'm working with, but they approach it like a painter. So it's usually comes back to painting. I do show a few sculptors, but primarily painters and primarily abstract artists.
Do you do secondary market work?
I do. I started doing that about 6 years ago, and I was trying to figure out how to do more advertising and how galleries in New York were able to fund some of the things that they were doing. And a friend of mine said, well, you need to get into secondary market dealing. And
secondary market, you guys, I want to remind you, is selling stuff that's already been sold at least once before.
Yeah.
You know, like a Van Gogh or something less, but like that.
Yeah. Or a Pollock painting, or Kenneth Nolan painting I sold recently. And
you haven't sold a Pollock, have you?
Yep.
Awesome.
There's some amazing
Jackson Pollock.
That's funny. There's some amazing private collections in Philadelphia, and the more people have gotten to know me over the years, they've trusted me with working with some of their artworks.
You know, I used to think that being honest and, well, being honest was something you did because it was a value that was worth, it was a proper value. But really, it's a really pragmatic, solid strategy, you know, and people come to appreciate it. And, you know, being a good human being works in your favor.
Usually.
Yeah, usually. Okay. So, how many artists have you taken on in the past, let's say, 12 months?
I haven't signed on. Actually, I'm working with signing on a Brazilian painter who lives in New York right now, who I've worked with before. And
how many relationships have you terminated?
Actually, it's interesting because I've gone through a few cycles, and that was something I was thinking about. Like when I opened up, I had a core group of 20 artists, and then after about 7 years, many of them weren't working and they weren't growing, and so I cut like 7 artists, and that was really hard for me because they're like family for me, and but I had outgrown them, and I think they weren't really going to be doing much else, and so I signed on another 7 artists, and then I'm in a cycle again where some of them aren't doing anything again, and some of them are off the grid, and some of them have expanded so much that they're going to be picked up in New York, and they don't want to show in Philadelphia anymore. So it's time for me to regenerate my program.
Do you try to have artists at different price points? Do you want somebody under 5,000 and somebody over 50,000, or do you want them all between 10,000 and 12,000?
I have different price points, and I do, because I still love working with emerging collectors, and I get equally excited with someone coming in to spend $1,000 as spend $50,000. And
do you find it's about the same amount of effort? I mean, selling a piece for 1,000 and a piece for 50,000 is comparable effort.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so too.
Yeah, and I really do. I love emerging artists and I love emerging collectors. So I recognize that I want to keep that price point in the gallery, and I want to help artists grow. So that's very intentional.
Do you predominantly do one-person shows? Yes.
Yeah.
And how long do they last?
4 to 6 weeks typically.
And then there's a week downtime. It's not really downtime, but there's a week, between shows.
Actually, no. We deinstall Saturday at 4 o'clock, and the new show opens on Tuesday at 10 a.m.
Whoa! And when do you have your receptions?
Philadelphia has something called First Fridays, and we all open up the first Friday of each month and have openings here.
How many galleries are within 3 blocks of you or 2 blocks of you?
There are 3 galleries around me.
Do you try to have so you try to have openings the same time? You do this together in consort?
Yeah, it's this unspoken, well, it's spoken a long time ago. The Old City Association decided that they would encourage people to come out for gallery openings. So they started First Fridays in Philadelphia, and it is a fun night. So I participate in that, and all the galleries do for the most part.
When you're installing the show, does the artist participate in the installation?
They used to.
They used to. I understand that one. Yes, and
after a few years, I realized it was better for both of us if I took the work in and curated it and didn't hang certain things and decided where everything was going. It's one thing to make the work. It's another thing to bring it in and curate your own work once it's in the space. And what was happening is they wanted me to hang everything, and I wasn't agreeing with it. And so I realized the way to not deal with that is to not have them install with me.
you know, I mean, yeah, strategically, a sense of scarcity. I always wanted to have a blank wall, you know, so that, you know, because the gallery was large enough that I could do that. But I didn't want to hang everything. I wanted a sense that, you know, there's some demand, or, you know, you better act now. And thought that led to more sales. I also found it tended to be true, wasn't absolute, that painters or people who work two-dimensionally were not very good at installing three-dimensional exhibits. Sculptors, I found, were, you know, people who work two-dimensionally, I said, usually I'll take care of it. Whereas sculptors, I said, you can stop by. And, you know, that tended to work out all right, you know, how people dealt with the differences between two- and three-dimensional space.
Oh, yeah.
I think we should open this up to some questions. Harley, you've been having a bunch of questions. Pick your best one, Harley. I'm coming at you. Harley's all the way in Australia, and it's already Harley's in the future. It's Tuesday morning there, Harley. Go ahead.
How are you going? Lovely to hear you talk passionately about what you do. My question is about Federico's.
Yes.
His last name. The big shows that he's just recently become a part of, how instrumental were you in getting him those shows, or are you part of a group of galleries that represent him and work with him?
I'm very lucky to be able to work with Federico, and it took me a number of years of working with one of his dealers in Spain and basically selling enough work for them where they recognized that I could handle the level of his work, and I was selling enough where they would make money off of me working with him in the United States. So it took me about 3 years of selling the work to get them to agree to him having a solo show with me. And then that led to me taking him to several art fairs and exposing the work to the greater curatorial public and museums. And having it seen by curators at the Philadelphia Museum of Art, and they ended up purchasing work. So I think through people seeing it advertised in the US for the first time, I put it in all the art magazines, it got reviewed a lot, and seeing it out at art fairs, that helped people to come to the work. And he's also very, very good at networking, but in a very understated way. So he's typically out there meeting people in a very organic, lovely way.
When you began working with him, you were working with him through other galleries, and now you're working with him directly. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes. Yeah. I worked with his primary gallery in Madrid, and they were very particular about what collections the work was being placed in and who was buying it. And after placing it in enough good collections, they let me do the solo show, and then from there, he and I established our own relationship.
So
how long is this? Go ahead. I'm sorry, Harley. Go ahead.
So it wasn't just you deciding that you would take this artist and push him into these shows. It was a group of you going, right, we can take this artist and do this, this, and this with him?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, the art world is so connected now. I mean, there's so many people that when I started showing him, they didn't know who he was. And then it's just interesting how it happens. UBS ended up featuring him in
Time out. Who's
their
UBS?
lounge. What's that?
I know, but who's UBS?
Right.
No, you said
just things like that happen to bring the work to like different audiences, and it just kept building. And he shows internationally, and I find that curators are all over the world right now seeing different artists. So yeah.
Okay, thank you. Harley, thank you too. Michael, your question and Brandon's is the same, but you got there first. And I'm hearing a number of artists curious about this question. Michael, take it away.
Yeah, I was wondering about what you expect to see when you go to a studio visit, especially in terms of number of pieces, and then what would the number of pieces be for a show?
It's a great question. I love when I see, depending on the type of artist you are, what kind of work you're doing, it might be different with, say, sculpture, but with paintings, I usually like to see 8 to 12 paintings, and some of them could be in progress, and typically I'm showing between, depending on size, 8 to 20 paintings in my gallery. It's about 3,000 square feet. And I'm looking to see work that has a point of view and that's developed, and you know, it's so personal. It has to resonate with me on a personal level, and I recognize that I can't show art that I wouldn't buy and put on my walls. So sometimes I don't even know why I'm responding to something and not responding to something else. And but I really appreciate someone who's taken the time to develop their vision and what the work is about, and they've worked out the process, and there's something that makes it different from the other artists that are out in the world.
Oh, Michael, I muted again. Are you good with that, Michael?
Yep, that's great, thanks.
All right, Anne, let me go up here. Go ahead, Anne.
Yes, hi. What is your best quality as a salesperson in your gallery? What do you do the best?
Persistence and follow-up. You know, as I collect, I go to galleries and I buy art, and I bought art at fairs, and I was just at a gallery today buying a piece of art. Sometimes I'll ask for information and I don't get any follow-up. So if someone comes in and expresses any interest, I always send them something, even if they haven't asked me to. And so I think following up with people, you know, I think artists do this. Someone will say, oh, send me your website, or, oh, like, put me on your mailing list, or, you know, send me something, or what are you doing? And a lot of artists can't even talk about what they're doing. And if people express that curiosity, I always follow up, and I'm persistent.
How do you be persistent without being an ass?
I just keep it simple, and I just say, like, I just want to make sure that you got the information that you wanted or that I sent to you. And if you did, great, and let me know what you think. And I'll give it space and time.
Do you see something that many artists that you wish they did better?
Talk about their work. Even in my own program, I have a few artists who are incredible painters. They cannot articulate what their work is about. And even if you have a canned paragraph that you've practiced, I think it's really important to know how to talk to someone. And you don't even have to get them interested, or just tell them a story. Anything about what your work's about.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good point. I'm available, or we're available for more questions, you guys. Don't be timid. And I would love to hear from those of you who haven't asked a question yet this summer.
And by the way, Paul, I took a peek at your book, and it's incredible. And I have to say, like, as someone who spent a lot of hours working with artists one-on-one and helping them, I think this book is going to help so many artists with so many ideas.
Oh, awesome. Thank you. I don't even know if these guys know I've written a book.
I can't wait to see it in print.
You and me both. Yeah, and I was so excited to find a publisher. What do you expect artists to do for you? I mean, or the gallery? What is their role? I mean, how do they, let me ask you, let's be even more loaded. What can artists do to help you take care of them?
Yeah. The most obvious, which is not obvious to every artist, is to continue to paint and make new work, and to continue to push the ideas in the work. And sometimes I find that I'm pushing them to expand, and they're in this comfort zone. So making new work, pushing their own boundaries. And then once they're like, they have that going, a lot of times I'm really surprised that artists, when they're out in the world, don't market themselves more and let people know that, oh, my gallery is doing this, or I have a show, or I have my work on this website. I have 2 artists that are really good at doing that, and I can't tell you, they've sent people to me and it's turned into sales for them. And it just very simple things, just keeping people updated. Artists have a lot of power to get people interested in what they're doing and to market their own work.
Really true. How often should artists be in touch with you? How often, who's initiating the follow-up dialogue, between the artists you represent? Are you calling them every other day, every month, once every 3 months, never? They call you? What's going on?
I speak to them at least once a month, and sometimes more if we're working on multiple projects. And for me, the more I'm talking to them, the better. It just means that we're doing a lot of stuff and having a lot of engagement. And for some of them, I speak to them once a week. I would say some artists just want to inundate me with stuff that I don't really need to know about. And I just ignore their email sometimes, and sometimes I reach out. I think updating with new work, updating with a new idea, updating with a contact to add to their mailing list, updating with someone that the artist would like me to follow up with. Those are all great reasons to be in touch with me.
Is there more that they should do or can do when they're having an exhibit?
Yeah, let people know. And I, hand out cards, talk about it. Like market what they're doing, and talk about it. And I'm really into business development, and I'm a salesperson at the end of the day, and I make myself, even though some days I don't want to, I set outcomes like talk to 20 clients today, reach out to 15 press people that might be interested in the show. And I'm constantly pushing myself to communicate more about the shows, because I feel like I have a responsibility within a 4 to 6 week period to do the most that I can do for that show, because an artist just spent maybe a year and a half making the show for the gallery. So, but once the work is dropped off, an artist should be out there doing the same thing, even though it might be outside their comfort zone and they might not want to do it.
I think it's important for artists to be creative with their careers. I once had an artist who said to me, Paul, I want my announcement. This is one, I don't know, do you still do paper announcements?
Oh my God, I love doing them, and people love getting them. And
so the artist said to me,
I mix it up too. We do different formats. I showed Ryan McGinnis in the fall. We did a poster for him, and people loved it.
So I had an artist who said, I want a 5 foot wide announcement. And I said, well, I'll pay the first $2,000, but that's a $7,000 thing you're asking for. Yeah. And he said, fine, I'll give you the first painting that sells. And I said, okay, we'll do it. Let me call my printer collector. So I called the printer collector, and he said, yeah, let me send my wife in. If she likes it. And the paintings were $8,000. And I said, I'll give you so I said, you can have any he said, yes, she loves the work. As soon as the work shows up at the gallery, she comes in and gets the first pick. I said, fine. But I mean, it was on the artist to come up with this creative idea of saying, I want more. And, because we printed a 5 foot wide announcement, everybody thought I cared more about this artist than all the other artists. And therefore they were more interested, and therefore sales were much more significant. I mean, we must have sold 15 paintings, whereas I usually would sell 7, maybe. And, but,
Yeah.
you know, the artist gave up one to make that happen. And, you know, everybody came out ahead. The moral of the story is, you know, you guys should challenge those with whom you have a relationship by your creativity to do something where everybody comes out ahead.
Yeah.
I want to go.
I'll just share with you, some of the best artists that I'm working with now are the most demanding of me. You know, someone asked a question. I do have contracts with all my artists, and they're all different. And I'm demanding of them, and they're demanding of me. So I think artists feel kind of timid about asking a dealer, hey, I want to do this, or I'd like to try that, or how about this? And I've ended up splitting some certain costs, like you're talking about with ads, and where I'm going above and beyond. I think it's all in the realm of possibility. You have to ask, and you have to be creative in how you're going to have it happen.
Totally agree. And you guys need to be, you know, be aware of that. And if somebody loves you, I think you can ask them for a little bit more love. And maybe you need to, you know, lubricate that love. There's got to be a better way of saying that, Paul. I'm going to bail here and go to Daniel. Daniel, I like your question. Save my butt. Go ahead, Daniel.
Bridgette, thanks for doing this. I was just curious, there's a number of people talk about the idea of interest in artists by collectors and critics as a cult of personality. And I'm curious what your take is on that in terms of how much, you know, like what do collectors really want to know about the artists as actual individuals, or more as a...
Sometimes they don't want to know anything. They just really connect with the work, and it's about the work, and they'll read a resume or read a statement. I have a lot of people that they don't want to know about the artist, where they're born. Some of them don't even want to know what the work is about. They just connect with it in their own way. I have a client, he calls himself someone that he won't say it, but he loves famous artists and famous people. He wants to collect what the best people in the art market are collecting, and usually there's a personality with that artist, and he wants a rock star. I have a few people that are interested in that, and often my clients, a lot of them want to know that the artist is going to be around in the next 10 to 15 years, that the work is going to keep expanding, and that besides enjoying the work and hanging it and putting it in their collection, there's going to continue to be growth and value in the work. And some of them love meeting the artists and getting to know them. I have a lot of clients that have relationships now with artists that they've collected over the years, and they've become friends. And I think it's enriching for their world to be in the artist world.
Daniel, I had to mute you again because there was background noise. Let me unmute you. There you go. You good, okay. Daniel?
I'm good, thanks. Yeah.
All right, Chris. Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, thanks for talking with us, Bridgette. Some really great information here. Usually when you like an artist, how soon do you get back to them? Because I don't know, for me, you know, I send stuff out and to, you know, different galleries or curators, and, you know, you never know if you hear from them again, you know, unless if they really like you, do they jump right on you, or do you give them a few months to think about it, or how does all that work?
If I like someone, I'm aware that they might be sending out multiple packages, and I'll try to connect with them like within the week. Unfortunately, a lot of artists send out packages and they don't always end up being looked at. Some of them are tossed. Some gallery websites have on it, we're not looking at artist submissions, and I find that artists don't do their homework, and they might be sending out packages where it's not a match with the gallery's not looking, but if everything seems to be pointing in the right direction, I would follow up within a week. Usually by email, and most galleries have at least one or two assistants that can field a phone call and take a message.
But I also think, as we've discussed previously, you know, Chris, that sometimes, you know, it's not a mistake to send an email to a gallery saying, I like your program. I appreciate the show you did with so-and-so. I thought it was interesting or challenging. Here's a work of mine, so you know where I'm coming from. Thanks so much. And you're not even asking for anything, you know. And then to follow up later. I mean, with a lot of times with good art, it takes more than one viewing to say, "Oh my, I'm really relating to this." So that I think a slower, more subtle approach can frequently be wiser, and you're not putting all your eggs in one basket, except, you know, spreading it out more.
That's true. And also, if you have people that have bought your work and they're friendly with galleries, I've had collectors say, hey, you should take a look at this artist. Or I've asked certain collectors of mine that shop around to show another dealer an artist that I'm working with. So a collector can be a good connector, but the work has
can other artists be?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I mean, yeah, this is what we keep hearing about, is that, you know, there's this thing called the internet, and people communicate and they share ideas and go, whoa, Bridgette, this is right up your alley.
Yeah.
You know, and that kind of thing happens. Elisa, I want to hear your question. Hold on, I'm getting there. Go ahead, Elisa.
Hi, Bridgette, thank you. How much can an artist move and approach and still keep the collector's interest if it's based on past work?
How much? I would say as an artist, that's your job to keep pushing yourself and moving forward. And when I'm like getting comfortable seeing someone's work, I feel like that's when they need to keep growing. And I've had artists that have changed their works over the years, and people still keep coming back and buying it. It's just, they're part of the continuum and the growth. And so I would say you should keep growing it and changing it and evolving it.
You know, there's an artist that I know who now shows with Mary Boone, and he feels like, you know, the gallery's rent is so high, the pressure is so high that he can't afford to experiment, and he's feeling like his career is stifled because he's showing with a gallery of such a high caliber, and, you know, he loves it and he hates it both. So, you know, it can be a problem. I don't know what he's going to do.
With stuff like that, I feel like as an artist, you can be making, I mean, and this is where galleries at the Mary Boone level really control what the artists are making a lot of times. And if you are in that situation where you have to make work like that, you can always develop what you're interested in on the side. And I've encouraged artists to do that, so that at some point, you know, a dealer might be interested in that work.
I think that's smart. Barbara, yeah. I like your question. Barbara Friedman, go ahead.
I'm curious if emerging artist denotes a specific age.
No, it doesn't.
I know 90-year-old emerging artists, you know, I mean.
It's you.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you. I wanted to clear that one up. Connie, your turn. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was wondering, you had said something, Bridgette, about the artist learning to talk about their work.
Yeah.
Do you mean like, well, I've heard some theories say that when you're showing a certain piece or somebody's talking to you about buying it, that you shouldn't tell them your take on the particular piece, because then that might change how they feel about it. Are you talking about talking to gallery owners or?
Well, of course, at some point you're going to be in a position of talking to a gallery owner, and they'll be much more impressed if you can articulate what the work is about. But I was mainly thinking, you know, you're at a party, you're at a cocktail party, you're at some event, you're at a birthday party, you know, a social event, and people want to know, what do you do for a living? Oh, I'm an artist. Oh, what does your work look like? Or what kind of art do you make? And it's interesting to be able to paint someone a picture without them being in front of your work and make some type of connection for them, so that they might want to go look at your website. So to be able to describe to someone what you do.
I think it goes back to the notion of dating, and I think you want to be, you know, you want to draw a picture where people want to know more. And so you don't want to tell them everything, but you want to get them.
That's a good analogy. Because like dating, you got to like boom, boom, boom. You have 5 minutes to make that impression. And I've listened to artists in 5 minutes where I'm like, wow, I got to look at the work. I want to see the work. Or,
and other ones where I want to take a nap.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
So like the little elevator speech.
Yeah. I mean, I get it all the time. People want to know about the gallery and, oh, what kind of gallery, what kind of artist. And, you know, 13 years ago when I started, I would get a lot of questions about my resume because I looked really young. So I came up with a short paragraph where I would give people enough content that they were interested and knew I was serious.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Diane, I'm not quite clear on your question, so I'm going to let you ask it and find out what it is. Go ahead, Diane.
Okay, I was just really, it's a sort of a continuation on emerging artists. How much does the resume weigh in your decisions on working with the artists?
That's secondary. For me, I always start with the work itself, and that's more important to me than the resume, because to me a resume can always be added to and expanded, and I think artists should always be trying to get into shows and expand their resume, but I always start with the work itself.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
But also you want to sense, as you mentioned earlier, Bridgette, that the artist isn't going to quit in 18 months.
Oh, yeah.
The artist has a 20-year resume. We're pretty sure they're going to keep going. You know, so that if you don't have a substantial resume, you need to have more, your conviction needs to be demonstrated so that the gallery isn't afraid you're going to go off and open a bakery instead.
Yeah. I mean, and I think if you're talking to someone in the industry, they kind of know that through their conversation with you and how you talk about your work and your process and what you're doing.
Right.
I can tell if someone is serious or if they're a hobbyist.
It's not hard. All right, this might be the last question. Michael, and it may not be an easy one. Go ahead, Michael.
How do you work with an artist that hasn't sold before to determine the value of their work?
That's a great question. In that situation, I usually like to start the price point lower because I feel like there's always room once you sell it and once you have people like that you're putting on a collecting list to grow the pricing. And I've learned early on that if you overprice something, you can't go backwards. So I tend to start at a conservative level, and it's about usually around, it's kind of like real estate, like the size of the piece and the materials involved, and that's a really it's a good thing to go to galleries and look at their price sheet and try to understand why work is priced the way it is. And I've had people ask me about that. I'm very transparent with pricing, and so emerging artists, depending on the medium, I usually sell works between, I would say $2,000 and $6,000.
How big is a $2,000 and $6,000 piece?
So even 50, like let's say 1,500 to 2,000 or 2,500 could be like 15 inches up to like 30 inches. And then getting into $3,000, maybe that's like 30 to 40 inches. And then 4 to 5 is 50 to 60 inches.
Yep.
Yeah.
Awesome. Bridgette, I think this has been really wonderful. I really appreciate this. I want to echo Anne's comment. There's a chat box where I can preview questions and comments. So, Anne's comment was, thank you for your integrity.
My pleasure. But before we end, I just want to throw something out there to all the artists. I'm doing a benefit exhibition in my gallery in September. And if you log onto the gallery's Facebook page, we're inviting artists to participate. We're sending them panels, and they're 10 by 10 inches. And there's information on the show. And we have, I think we still have at least 15 to 20 spaces open for artists that want to be part of the show. It's a community show. We'll send the panel to Australia, but you have to pay the shipping.
There you go, Harley.
Is this open to sculptors?
The format is a 10 by 10 inch panel. And if you can do your sculpture on that panel, then you can do it.
Great.
It has to be hung on the wall.
Right.
What's the panel made of?
What's that?
What's the panel made out of?
It's a ampersand gesso board panel. There
you go.
All right. Look at my Facebook page, and you're invited to just send us a message.
All right, I want to thank Bridgette, and then I want to tell you guys about my book because somebody asked. All right, everybody, Bridgette, this has been fabulous. You will be hearing from people. Your email box will be full.
Bridgette.
Thank you,
Bridgette.
Thank you, Bridgette.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bridgette.